providing this vision and this strategy, we will facilitate action. Because without a vision or a strategy and defining priority areas, we're going to be all over the place as EU. Member states are going to do very different things, and that will not help industry in preparing for their investments that are very significant.
Hey, SpaceWatchers, and welcome back to Space Café Radio. And we do this recording here live from the Ministry of Economics of France in the middle of beautiful Paris. And the occasion is the 7th Summit of Space Sustainability, organized by the Secure World Foundation, the CNES, and the French government. And I have the great honor to meet again with Marjolijn van Dalen, the space envoy of the European External Action Service at the EU. Marjolijn, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Torsten. Thanks so much. It's really good to see you again, and especially great to have this opportunity here in Paris.
Likewise. So, when we met the last time in Prague over a year ago, you outlined the ambitions to bridge the space and defense community. And a year later, what concrete progress have you made?
It's amazing how much has happened in a year. I can't believe it. But of course, I can't take credit for that. It's something that we do as EU institutions together and together with our member states, most importantly. But to highlight a few things that have happened, you've seen the Preparedness Union strategy, which came out that already highlighted the need for some sort of space shield. The EU needs for readiness were further highlighted in the white paper that came out after that. And actually, just last week, a roadmap for readiness came out in order to get us to our objectives that were already highlighted in the white paper.
So a lot of paper was produced in this year.
Oh, we're so good at that. But what was key, I think, in the white paper is that it designated space as an enabler. So space is relevant for all other areas in which the EU needs to ramp up its capabilities. And space is one of them, is a strategic enabler. So it's recognized. I think that is very important because it puts it alongside other areas of capabilities that need to be ramped up, but also pays attention to its transversal nature, and it's important to other areas as well. Of course, air missile defense first come to mind, where space is clearly very relevant, but in almost all other areas it is as well. So we've made that step from strategic domain to strategic enabler.
Let's have a bit of a focus on the Europe space security shift that you just mentioned. The white paper for European defense sets the strategic vision, while the Preparedness Union tackles the civilian resilience. So how are these two now convening from your EAS perspective?
That's a very good point. The Preparedness Union strategy had a whole of government, whole of society approach and focused on the effects to our societies. And if our societies are vulnerable in one way or another, that means they need to be protected and they need to be resilient and prepared. So that makes an automatic link between preparedness and then, the defense and security side of the white paper. And in space, this is especially visible because space is not only important for security and defense, but also very much so for our societies. As we all know, we all use space all the time, every day. And not only in developed countries, also in developing countries. So for worldwide, it is key that we preserve that need for our societies. That is because systems in space are most often dual use. That is the same interest that we have on the defense side, where we need to make sure we keep access to our assets in space and that we can provide for their security and resilience. So that is the trait d'union between the two where it concerns space.
Does it mean that we are finally breaking down the institutional silos between the Commission, your organization, ESA, member states, when it comes to space security, or is that just a well-thought illusion?
We will have to, especially as security and defense is the prerogative of member states. And I think the roadmap is very clear in that. It says it will build on national and commercial space assets with the support of the EU space systems. We really need to look at what can we do at European level, what should be done at national level, how to make sure we don't duplicate, that we don't have gaps, that there's interoperability between the two. I think that is a challenge before us, and that is why member states and the Commission and the EES as the responsible for CFSP and CSDP in the EU, as well as EDA, really need to work hand in hand.
Okay. So what are the most visible outcomes of this new strategy, for example, in crisis response, cyber resilience, or even satellite protection? For this triangle of the new documents that were produced, are they really tangible, visible outcomes? You mentioned the readiness reports, where we will go into more details a bit later, but are there others as well?
I think then we have the tangible outcome of the defense readiness roadmap will most likely be a European space shield. That is what it proposes. But if you mention cybersecurity, crisis management, we also need to go back to the space strategy for security and defense of 2023 that we have and that we have already been implementing in the last 2-3 years since we had it. And there we've made big steps on common threat perception, threat awareness with our classified space threat landscape. We really were getting very close to finalizing the work on the review of our response to any threats to EU space assets. It was announced in that strategy. The Commission on Resilience has proposed a Space Act, which includes a lot of cyber elements and resilience elements. That's their proposal. It's currently being debated with member states, but it's that is very much ongoing work and very tangible work. And then also on the international part of norms, rules, and principles of responsible behavior, of rules of the road, which will really help us a lot to keep our assets secure. Actually, it's more a prevention element, so I think it should come first rather than last. Somehow in our strategy it is mentioned last. And there we've also seen very good progress in the UN context, where the open-ended working group has started, where we have overcome procedural problems, and where we've now entered in a substantial debate. We, as EU, are really excited about that we can get to that level and get some results. To complete the story, as also, of course, the strategy mentions our intention to increase our bilateral relations. And there we're really working with NATO quite a lot. But when we've carried out the dialogues that we've had for many years, the oldest one is the one with the US. We're also developing new ones with other partners, including in the context of the security and defense partnerships.
Other partners or new partners such as, can you talk about those?
Korea, we started a new one with. We intend to have one with India later this year. It's the first one, so we'll have to see how that works out. Australia, looking at UK, Canada, in the context of the security and defense partnerships.
I stuck the moment with UK, but yes.
Yeah, we now have a security and defense partnership.
They decided to be on their own. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, but now we have this partnership that was signed not too long ago, and space is one of the many areas of cooperation. So we're discussing with them right now how we can take forward our dialogue. That's what it is about.
As you mentioned earlier, it was a very busy year, and it seems to be very, very busy in the production of new initiatives, as we said, new documents, but all with a clear goal, and that's very impressive. The latest one, and you mentioned it before, the Defense Readiness Roadmap that was just announced. And for me, it translated the strategies into actions with the air shield, the drone defense, the Eastern Flank Watch, and the European Space Shield, as you mentioned. It is bold, without any doubt, and I admire the work that went in, but as I see it, it still has gaps. So, for instance, no clear command structure, limited space defense doctrine, and little focus on diplomatic crisis management. So how is the EEAS ensuring that the space readiness roadmap turns into concrete capabilities, especially in the space domain?
That's a very good point, and that's a discussion that we need to have, especially with member states. What is it that they want the EU to do, and what do they want to keep national? And how can those two work together? As I spoke about in a white paper, you have these priority capability areas identified, of which space is one. And in that context, we will also have broader discussions with member states that include all of space. So the flagship project is one very tangible thing that we can already do. But then we need to further have that discussion with member states, indeed, on all those other elements. Where are the gaps? How are we going to fill them? Who is going to fill them? Is the EU the best placed? Is another international organization better placed? Is it member states themselves? Yeah, still much work to do.
Yeah, and like many of the strategies, they give a guideline into things, but they don't tell you who is doing what, when, and why. The next question on that angle to try to get a bit through the cloudy diplomatic tone that is in all these documents. So from your vantage point, what does the European Space Shield really change for Europe's autonomy in space? And who will coordinate it in practice?
I think the High Representative, Carlos, my boss, has been very clear that it is the member states that have the lead on these capabilities. So we really need to keep that in mind. But especially if you look at space, we have an EU space program, and that has been over the years gearing more and more or serving more and more defense needs. And the Galileo PRS, we're discussing the Earth Observation Governmental Service, IRIS² is in the making. So we need to discuss with member states how that can already serve their needs and what is still needed and how we do that. But we have a number of coordination mechanisms already in place, like on the EDF and the EDIP work programs, safe instruments. So we will also look how we use those to make sure they focus on the priorities in each of the capability areas, including space. So in those formats, we already have mechanisms. But I think we might need something a bit broader to overlook also the totality of capabilities. Because if you do a program by program, there's a chance that you might miss a need or do worse duplication. So we already have something, but not the full picture yet.
It's work in progress.
Yes, absolutely. But we need to be ready by 2030. So progress is fast.
Indeed. Yeah. Germany is talking about readiness by 2029. Already, at least, our commander-in-chief talks about that. Where do you see the balance between the national champions and pan-European cooperation? So can be programs like SAFE and EDIP instruments deliver real speed?
These instruments are needed for member states to find the cooperation mechanisms and find the funds to implement what it is that we want to do. Without those, it will be much, much harder. And especially if you look at space, which is too costly for any one member state to do all by itself, we really need this cooperation platform and this funding platform.
My concern from reading not all, but many of these documents. So we have funding and frameworks, and also these were the words of the German Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius. What we lack is speed now and clear industrial ownership. Is the EEAS able to push that coordination politically?
Of course, we can't push the industry, but what is clear is that by providing this vision and this strategy, we will facilitate action. Because without a vision or a strategy and defining priority areas, we're going to be all over the place as EU. Member states are going to do very different things, and that will not help industry in preparing for their investments that are very significant. So that is one of the ways in which we think we can help gear us up towards the necessary speed.
Let's come back on one of your field of expertise, diplomacy in that case. The roadmap is strong on deterrence, less so on diplomacy. How is the EU ensuring that readiness also includes peace readiness, negotiation, de-escalation, and crisis decision-making?
I think this is something that we have always done and that we will continue doing. We just had the realization that is not enough because we see what our adversaries are doing. And we need to be prepared to be able to face that. But that doesn't mean we're letting go of all the other areas of diplomacy. Actually, you see the whole of the EAS working very hard to work with third states, be they like-minded countries, be they developing countries, in cooperating more closely, including in preserving what we have agreed in the UN Charter. That is something that we really believe in, that we need to do everything we can to preserve that context. Although without it, we'll end up in a Wild West situation, which will only make things worse.
So it's not an either or, it's an end with shifted priorities, so to say.
I'm not sure shifted priorities is the right word.
A stronger emphasis on certain priorities.
Yeah, an emphasis on new priorities. But the old ones are absolutely still there. And we're also doubling up on those.
Ukraine is also mentioned in the roadmap, and it's described as Europe's first line of defense. So how is the EU integrating Ukraine battlefields innovation and industrial capacity, especially in space and drone technologies, into the European framework?
Indeed, that's a key element, that our support to Ukraine is a two-way street. We are learning from the amazing advances that Ukraine has made and the knowledge it has developed. I don't know the details of those mechanisms. We have a few things going in space, but I can't yet talk about those until we have set them up.
No problem at all. So that brings us into the last question. So looking forward, 2026, what milestones should we watch for the Space Shield, for defense space integration, and for Europe's strategic maturity?
On space, our aim is, as expressed in the readiness roadmap, is to launch the Space Shield in the second quarter of next year. So watch us.
And the other milestones that we can watch? Or is it just the Space Shield?
The Space Shield is the biggest one, the most visible one, for which we already have a milestone. For the rest, it depends on discussions of member states and what they want us to do before we can set very concrete milestones on those.
Good. Is there anything to add from your end to our conversation that I missed to ask?
You missed to ask. Thank you very much for a very engaging conversation. I think we've touched on the most important issues, thinking very quickly here.
When I summarize our conversation, then I see three takeaways, main takeaways. So A, space is now central to Europe's defense identity as well. The second point is readiness needs both command and diplomacy. The third is 2030 depends on execution and not just on ambitions. And I think that's the common mantra that we see in the EU and your organization, and as well in Germany with our new budget on space defense.
Yes.
Marjolijn, thank you very much for your time. All the best for you and your organization. And we like to have these annual updates from your end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Torsten. It was a real pleasure. And I hope that next year I'll have a lot to report again.
Wonderful. Thank you. If you have further questions, reach out to us at radio@SpaceWatch.Global. If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Torsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.